If you're here, I'm guessing you like listening to stories. So, for this episode, I'm partnering with the biggest digital audiobook company in the world, Audible. Audible really are the best at what they do and preside over the biggest collection of top quality audiobooks around. They even host podcasts and produce top tier exclusives that you can only hear with Audible. Some of Audible's celebrity narrators include Kevin Hart, Ethan Hawke, and Kerry Washington. And the choice of genres is as vast as the number of titles available for download. Sign up to Audible now, and you can choose from one free title a month to keep forever, including the latest bestsellers and new releases. Members also get full access to a growing selection of included audiobooks, Audible originals, and podcasts. You can download or stream their included titles all you want. Audible is so supportive of narrators, audio dramas, and spoken fiction that they're even offering all you loyal Buttersock cultists a free membership for 30 days. All you gotta do is head over to audible.com/LetsReadYT, one word, or text Let's Read YT to 500-500. Back when I was in elementary school, I used to wake up super early on the weekends. I'd get up way before my mom, dad, or older brother, and I'd go downstairs to watch cartoons and make myself some cereal. I always appreciated that hour or so I had by myself. We weren't a rich family, so there was only one TV in the house, and getting a chance to watch whatever I wanted was a huge luxury for me. It might seem weird, but I remember those mornings being a really happy portion of my childhood. And I suppose that makes it all the more ironic that one of those mornings brought arguably the most disturbing event of my entire life. I think I must have been at least 6 or 7 because it happened in the first house I grew up in as a kid, and it happened on a Saturday morning like any other. I got up, went downstairs, made myself some cereal, then sat watching cartoons and playing Mega Drive until I heard the phone ring. Now, I really didn't want the rest of my family to wake up because that would obviously ruin my private time, so I rushed to the phone as quickly as I could with the plan of just telling the person to call back later. But then, as soon as I picked it up, put the receiver to my ear and started talking, I heard a voice on the other end of the phone say my name. That wasn't the first time someone had done that. People who knew our family that called our house would generally know if they heard a younger voice on the other end of the phone and that it was me. I've even learned to recognize a few voices, mainly for the way they greeted me, but I didn't recognize the man's voice from that morning, even though they seemed to know me very, very well. They said hi and stuff, asked if I was okay, then asked if I was watching cartoons like I normally did on a Saturday morning. I said yes, then told the guy that my mommy and daddy were sleeping, and that I asked him to call him back later if he told me his name. And that's when he said something like, "That's okay. I don't want to talk to them anyway. I want to talk to you." I remember thinking that was pretty unusual, and I also remember just wanting to go back to playing Sonic or Streets of Rage or whatever it is I was playing. But saying that, I also knew not to be rude to friends of my parents, so I stayed there on the phone just answering the guy's questions. It was all run-of-the-mill stuff at first, asking me how school was, if I liked the teachers and the other kids. I was giving him mostly and I guess answers, just wanting the guy to be done so I could go back to playing Mega Drive, but he just wouldn't seem to shut up. Finally, there was a pause in the conversation, a few moments of dead air, and I figured that he'd run out of things to say and was about to hang up. I had no idea who the guy was, nor did I care. I just wanted the call to be over. But then, like I said, he started saying stuff that made me think the guy was really close to our family. Without having to type out the whole conversation, he seemed to know what cartoons I liked, what my favorite kind of cereal was, what pajamas I was wearing, all kinds of stuff. It didn't set alarm bells ringing or anything, even though it really should have. I just figured that he was one of my many uncles, as both my mom and dad came from families with lots of siblings. But then the guy started talking to me in a way in which no uncle would ever talk to their nephew. I don't really want to get into exactly what he said. A lot of it was just beyond disturbing, but at the time, I didn't really know what he was talking about. There were a lot of words and phrases used that meant nothing to me until years later, so although I kinda knew some of it was bad, it didn't really affect me until years later when the implications of the call became clear. So the guy said all this weird stuff that he wanted to do with me. Then he made some weird noises, but thankfully, right as I got to being so uncomfortable that I wanted to drop the phone and run away, he just thanked me and hung up. As you can imagine, the whole thing was on my mind all day, but I think I stayed quiet because of how uncomfortable I was. Then, with the classically awkward timing that only kids seem to have, I brought the issue up at dinner the following evening. I remember mentioning the call, then showing some curiosity about it. Then the next thing I mentioned was one of the phrases the guy had said to me. It was one of the ones I didn't understand when he said it to me, and he said it during the part of the call that made me feel really uncomfortable, and when I said it, my dad actually spat a mouthful of food onto the table. The way I phrased it was like, "What does it mean? Blah blah blah," and just hearing the phrase seemed to send my parents into orbit. They immediately sent me up to my room. I threw a tantrum because I had no idea what I'd done, and I was still severely shaken from the call. It basically took a whole thing before my mom finally came to talk it out with me. I was still very ignorant of what had actually happened at the time, the overall significance of it anyway. I knew what the guy had said was wrong in some way, I just didn't know how to express it. I also didn't understand why Mom and Dad were so utterly distraught when I told them as much of the stuff as I could remember. As far as I knew, someone had just said some mean stuff to me, and as Mom and Dad always told me, words couldn't hurt me. But then if that was true, why were they so angry and why were they so scared? I didn't really find out until years later, and my journey of unwilling discovery took place over a long period of time. I'd hear the odd word here and there throughout middle school and high school. Then when I found out what it meant, and I'd have this moment of, oh God, so that's what that guy wanted to do to me. I think that's why stuff messes you up as a kid so bad. You have all this time to dwell on it when you're still really confused and weak and vulnerable. I've clocked a fair few hours in therapy because of it, and I don't think there will ever be a time when I don't need to have that option on hand. As for the actual end of the story, as in what happened with the guy who called, I'm sorry to say that nothing came of it. Again, this isn't something that I found out until years later when Mom and Dad really broke the whole thing down for me, but yeah, they never caught the guy. The call came from a payphone, I guess, one not covered by cameras, and it came after the caller had obviously been watching me for quite some time. No incidental stuff either. The cops thought the guy might have actually watched me from the yard on a few Saturday mornings, just taking note of all the stuff that I did or appeared to enjoy. I guess all is prep for taking it a step further. Thankfully, he didn't, but it's always creeped me out how that guy might still be out there, still harboring all kinds of messed up urges that drive him to terrify innocent young children, just like I was. I'm hoping someone could give some suggestions or something on here. So a few strange things have happened to me lately. For context, my husband is a truck driver and is gone 2 to 3 weeks at a time. We live way out in the woods, nearest neighbors are about 2 miles away, and it's not a place to find easily unless you know exactly where you're looking for. I work at home and am very private about my life on social media and do not do anything unnecessary that would be easy to find me. I'm just a very private person. I barely use Facebook except to keep in contact with a few family members. So I found it odd that around a week ago, a clearly made-up name for a Facebook user messages me, and they know my real name. I use a pen name for my Facebook where I post memes and my artwork. He gives details on what my home looks like, my town, and where I work. Odd, but I ignored it. The next day, the same user messages and asks me very personal questions and stating disturbing things that they would like to do and how easy it would be to get inside my home. I show my husband, who replies with the same user messaging disturbing odd things to him as well, asking very private things about me. Long story short, we find it weird but decide to block this account. As last week passes, I've received calls and text messages, assumingly from the same account. Every time I answered the phone, it was just deep breathing and then hanging up. Eventually, it freaked me out to the point that I put up trail cams and security cameras on my porch and around the property. Well, this morning I went to town for some errands and my Ring doorbell goes off, and there's a man wearing a black hoodie hiding most of his face standing on my back porch, and then banging on the door increasingly louder and yelling my name. This went on at least 15 minutes until we just stopped and walked off into the woods. I called the police, who checked the house and around the property and haven't found anyone. I even gave them the picture caught on my trail cams, and basically nothing can be done unless I am in immediate danger or he gets inside, and they suggested that I get a guard dog. My husband believes it's just a neighbor or friend pulling a prank, but this isn't like anything anyone I know would pull. The questions and statements made about what this person wanted to do is incredibly creepy. My husband and family think I'm overreacting, but to see someone just standing in my backyard super late at night when I live this far out isn't normal. I'm freaking out, and I don't know what to do. So, update on the strange goings-on. I woke up this morning, checked the cameras, no weirdos on the porch this time, but an eerie feeling all around and a dead bird right off my porch. There was blood, so I'm really hoping this was just an animal attack. I'm clearly paranoid at this point. I spoke on the phone with the husband and he sent screenshots of the messages he received. I unblocked and tried to call the number to see what would happen, and it says it's inactive. Reverse search for the number says it's a texting app number randomly given to the person, which is even more creepy. Now, a few things. 1. I'm having my younger brother come and stay with me for about a week. He'll be doing his college classes at home here. I know that sounds silly, but I can't afford to stay at a hotel or something at the moment. He's the only family member I keep in touch with on a regular basis. My relationship with the rest of the family is strained due to childhood trauma issues. And lastly, he is ridiculously big and strong for a 20-year-old kid and is fearless, and I just feel better having someone here since I can't exactly stay somewhere else. 2. I plan on getting a dog later in the week, hopefully to just have a big one as an alarm and guard. I also have ordered some better cameras to set up. 3. As someone has mentioned, yes, my brake lights were cut about a month ago, and I'm really suspicious now as my cameras didn't pick up anyone. Neighbors live on the main road just before you turn down the back road all the way to get out here and said they haven't seen anything weird, but they will keep an eye out now. And 4. Finally, I've read all the comments and a lot were suspicious of my husband. I want to let all of you know that I hear you, I'm not ignoring the signs, and to be frank with the strangers on the internet, I worried myself. I love him to death and I'm not about to go on a crazy train of accusing my husband of attempting to murder me or even anything harmless or as a prank. However, I am a very suspicious person who doesn't trust anyone 100%. There haven't really been any signs of anything weird on his end that I've noticed yet, and I have confirmed that he's been over the road like he said, but I'm just keeping the idea in my head just in case. And I'm trying to figure out how to post photos on this app so others can see proof. If I manage to do so, you all can see for yourselves. I have Mace and I'm about to check the cameras again and leave to pick up my brother. But one last thing. I'm in America, so I've been considering buying a gun and concealed carry permit. I grew up on a farm, I know how to shoot, I just prefer not to mess with them due to extremely traumatic events before in my life. And if anything more happens, I think I'm going to do it. I'm still alive, and I have a bit of an update. I just want to preface this with something real quick. First, I've seen all the comments and I've gotten numerous messages, and while I appreciate the concerns and tips, I'd like to say something. I'm not a young person or someone looking for attention. I can assure all of you that I am of sound body and mind and I am not imagining things. I don't struggle with mental illness, although I understand and hope the best for anyone who does. Second, I am not in tune with the internet, nor this app as well as many others, so I apologize for still trying to learn how to post pictures and such, and I hope to figure out too soon. So as for the update, well, the police took my cameras and have been holding them as evidence, and that's all I've been told. Yes, there were more pictures caught. My younger brother in college stayed with me for about a week, and We had thought things would calm down having a large male in the house, but a few nights into him staying, we both woke up in the middle of the night to banging on the front door. I checked the security cameras through an app on my phone. Same creepy guy standing there, hood pulled down and unable to see his face. My brother yelled that he was calling the police, and the man just said, "Okay," and laughed and walked off. I have no idea where to, just into the woods. Well, I called the police and we explained everything again. He didn't seem to take it seriously, and needless to say, neither of us slept well after that. The rest of that week was quiet, and I was terrified for him to go back to school, but my husband was coming home for about 2 weeks, so I felt a bit better. Things seemed to calm down the first week that he was home, and I thought whoever was playing the sick joke was finished. But this past weekend, we had some of his friends over, celebrating a birthday, and we all had drinks, so friends were invited to stay the night. Sunday morning, we all woke up hungover and planned to go to town for breakfast. When we stepped on the front porch, there was a roll of duct tape and a screwdriver that we don't own just laying on the ground. Cameras checked again, and there were a few times you could make out this guy's face, pacing the porch or peeking in the front windows, so we all drove straight into town and showed the police. This time they came, checked all over the property and the property line in the woods, and haven't found anything, but are hopefully able to find out who this creep is through what the cameras caught. My husband has tried to console me through pointing out the possibility that he may be someone mentally ill or something and not with bad intentions, but it's frightening regardless. On top of all of this, my friend who lives in town and my neighbor at the beginning of the road have both apparently reported seeing someone matching the description of our troublemaker outside a large white windowless van at my friend's place of work, driving past her house late at night and apparently following her home several times recently. My neighbor has said along the same lines that said man has stopped at her house to ask about the neighbor up there, my house being the only one. There's been a lot of reports and sights of a van similar in the area surrounding my small town about trafficking schemes, and it just very much puts me on edge. I'm not sure if this is someone with a mental illness, someone involved in human trafficking, or someone just pulling a sick joke or what, but I'm terrified and sick at the thought of being home any longer. My husband had to be on the road again this week, and I've decided to stay somewhere away from my town and have not told anyone. I don't have family or many friends, and at this rate, I don't know that I trust anyone to know anything right now anyway, but with no one possibly knowing my location to tell friends, husband, or the like, we'll see what happens. I know I may sound crazy to some. Some have and continue to say that I'm making things up, but at what cost? I have a private, happy life, and I gain nothing from this. I'm just living in fear anymore and hope it'll all go back to normal one day, as I'm beginning to regret moving to a small town. Before I begin, this encounter happened about 10 years ago. I was 22 years old, and I'm well aware that this was a very poor judgment call on my part. My parents always taught me to help someone in need, just not necessarily to the extent that I allowed. Up until this point, I didn't have much of a reason not to trust people, or find out that some may not always have good intentions. I have also had an unreasonably difficult time saying no to people my whole life, and have since had the help of a therapist to be better about that. I have only told this story to a handful of people because I truly am ashamed of my actions and potentially putting my daughter's life in danger. I was on my way to an event of some kind with my 3-year-old daughter when I realized that I had left something behind in my apartment. I was close enough to home that I decided to turn around and head home. As I was pulling into the parking lot of my apartment complex, a woman was walking kind of in the middle of a driving area and began waving me down. I pulled up next to the woman and rolled down my window about 1/3 of the way. She gave me this story about how she works at the nearby nursing home and that she had run out of gas on her way to the gas station and was asking for directions to the gas station. I didn't think much of the fact that she was roaming around in my apartment complex because it was pretty common for people to cut through as it sat between 2 main roads and avoids traffic lights. I gave her directions for a 5-minute walk to the gas station, but she mentioned that she was pregnant and that she wasn't feeling well. I tried telling her that I was in a hurry and assured her that it was a very quick walk, but she started to beg. At this time, she noticed my daughter was in the back seat. She had a look of surprise that I didn't think much of at the time, and she began talking to my daughter and made her laugh. She turned back to me and asked me one last time if I could just drive her to the gas station. At this point, I rolled my eyes and just gave in. I let her in my car, and she almost immediately asked if I have any money that she can use. My heart sank at that point, realizing that she was probably lying and just wanted to lie her way into some cash. I was honest with her and told her that I was broke and also didn't carry cash on me. She pointed out another resident in the complex and asked me to drive her to them. In my mind, there was still a slight possibility that she needed gas but didn't have the funds for it. So I drove her to the other person, and she rolled down my window and started asking them for money. They said no, and she pointed out to another person. At this time, I told her that I really had to be somewhere and couldn't keep helping her. I drove her closer to the other person, but far enough that she would have to get out of my car to talk to them, which thankfully she did. Once she got out of my car, I just sped off and drove to my destination. I told my mother about the story, and a week later she sent me a clip from the local news. The news mentioned a woman who would approach people asking for a simple favor, which led her to asking them for money. If these people said no, she pulled out a syringe or a needle of some kind and would threaten to stab them with it, and did end up stabbing them on one occasion. I look at the image of the person and instantly recognize that it's the woman that was in my car. I know these types of people don't have much of a conscience, but I truly believe the fact that my daughter was in the car that day is what kept that woman from stabbing me. So this story takes place back in the late summer of 2007. I was 18 years old, had graduated high school, and was looking forward to starting college in just a couple of weeks. I'm a tall guy, a bit over 6 foot, and was lanky in build back then. My dad and I had a yearly tradition of going on a trip to Redding, where we'd stay at a hotel for the weekend and go to the water slides, see a movie, grab dinner from a fancy restaurant or two, and just generally have a good time away from home. It was Saturday, and we'd gone to the water slides all day. Once the sun was setting, we decided to go to an In-N-Out for dinner, and then had planned to go to the movies later in the evening. We were going to see Rush Hour 3, but on this particular occasion, my dad had gotten pretty wiped out and decided that he would just relax at the hotel. I still wanted to go to the movies and said it was okay. He dropped me off at the movie theater, which was only a couple of miles from the hotel we were staying at, and I told him he didn't have to wait up for me. I just walked back after the movie. While I was waiting in line, I noted that there was a surprising amount of people around my age all going to see a movie called Superbad. It was starting 10 minutes later than Rush Hour 3, and I was so curious to see what it was about that I changed to that movie. It was a great time. The movie let out close to midnight, and I was full of energy. The moon was full, and it was warm at night in Redding, low 70s, so I was in good spirits as I started a leisurely walk back to the hotel. On my way back, I noticed a silver car pulling out from a nearby street. It was late on a quieter part of the city, so there wasn't a whole lot of traffic at the time, so it was notable. It slow rolled up to me and the passenger window rolled down. Inside was a guy who might have been in his late 20s or early 30s. He was clean-shaven with dark hair and decently dressed, and he asked me if I needed a ride. I thought it was a little odd, but he was smiling and seemed friendly enough. I'd had such a good day and was still full of energy though, so I said no thanks and told him I was just going to walk back to my hotel. His smile faltered for a moment and he asked if I was sure. I nodded, assuring him that I'd be all right. He shrugged his shoulders and asked one last time if I was certain. I said yeah, then I began to walk. He drove off and I thought that was the end of it, but it wasn't. About 2 minutes later, I was still walking along the street and I saw a car coming on the opposite side of the road. There was a cement divider on the center of the road and it only has a couple of areas where cars could turn around. I had been distracted with my own thoughts and wasn't looking for it, but I thought it might have been the same car. I glanced back and I could just barely see where the road curved and the car turned around at the same intersection. It turned around and came driving back my way, and now I knew it was the same car with the guy I'd talked to earlier. I saw him looking at me as he passed by me again, and chills went down my spine. I began to walk faster, but not too much, as I was giving him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe he thought that he'd forgotten something, but then realized he hadn't. Either way, I was paying attention now, and sure enough, as I walked forward, I saw him drive by on the opposite side of the road again. Any doubts I had disappeared, and now I was on edge, ready to bolt if I saw his car slow down next to me. I saw him drive by again, but also some other truck drove by on the opposite side of the street and his car passed me by. At this point, I could see where he could turn around, but I knew the streetlights that he could use weren't too far ahead either. I looked around, and across the street from me were some businesses, and they had bushes in front of them. I waited until I couldn't see the silver car anymore, and I ran across the street and hid behind the bushes, using them for cover. I watched and waited. I tied my shoes tight as my heart was pounding, hoping he wouldn't come by again. But he did. I saw his silver car drive by my hiding spot and let out a sigh of relief as he didn't suddenly decide to drive into the parking lot where I was. But I didn't move either. I knew he could turn around again, so I kept waiting. He drove by again on the opposite side of the street. I then started counting for 10 minutes, 600 seconds. I decided that if I saw his car drive by, I would start again, and I would still be ready to run just in case. The 10 minutes went by and I didn't see his car again. I got up and shakily made my way back to the hotel, keeping my eye out for any new cars coming my way. None did. My dad woke up when I got back to our hotel room and I told him what happened. He got up and took a look around the hotel parking lot before saying that we should lock the door, draw the curtains, and get some sleep, and we left early the next day. I'm really glad that I didn't get into that guy's car that night, because I just recently heard that there have been a number of kidnappings in that area around that time, with people getting taken after getting into seemingly friendly strangers' cars at night. A few months ago, I was staying in my partner's apartment for a few weeks by myself. I don't quite remember why I was out that late, but it was around 1 a.m. and I just got off transit. Only one other guy got off with me, and he was rather tall and walked briskly. I was ahead of him at first, but he quickly passed me because even though I have a quick stride, I'm pretty short for a guy. I don't normally live in that city, so I'm not sure why, but the streets were incredibly empty. I remember thinking that because there wasn't even a single car on the road. We were literally a 5-minute walk away from a major university, so it was very odd not to see a single person or car. The only lights were streetlights. I spent nights at my partner's place before, and I've never remembered ever being this dead. But anyway, I had walked down the street and was coming up to an intersection where I had to turn left. I noticed this guy standing around in front of the bank that was on that corner. The guy ahead of me walked by him with no problem and went straight. I was a bit wary, but didn't think much of it until I was about maybe a meter away, and he had sidestepped to be in front of me and held his arms wide open, grinning at me. I glanced in the direction of the guy who left the train with me, but he was across the street already. My heart was already pounding at this point, and I think I may have started to disassociate from the stress because I can't remember what he looked like, even though I remember looking directly at him. If this sounds like an overreaction, I have a history of multiple cases of CSA by different people and have PTSD among other mental illnesses that I still struggle with. At the time, I was falling back into my disordered eating again and was also underweight in addition to being short, so definitely not the person you'd expect to win in a fight, and I knew it. I remember being frozen for a moment, and then on instinct I very politely said, "No thank you," and took a step to the right towards the street and tried to keep walking forward. He moved in front of me again, still with his arms wide open, expecting me to hug him, still grinning. For some reason, I repeated my polite refusal and sidestepped again instead of running the opposite direction. Luckily, he let me pass, but I could hear him following me from a short distance. I was wondering what I could do in that moment. I couldn't fight him. There was no one around. If I tried to call someone, he was close enough to grab me, and I wasn't able to run very fast. I suddenly hear his steps speed up into a sprint, and before I could react, he slowed down again. I walked a bit faster. He repeated the same thing over and over. I wondered if I should go a different path so he doesn't know where I live. It wasn't the best idea since I didn't know the city well and he probably knew it better than I did. I decided that I knew that I could find help in the lobby, at least compared to if I went somewhere else. He sprinted at me again and I turned around and loudly asked him, "Do you need help?" I remember not feeling my body and feeling lightheaded from the anxiety. Despite how panicked I felt, my voice came out clearly and I sounded disdainful. I don't think I meant to sound like he was annoying and inconveniencing me, but that's how it came out. Then he spoke for the first time and responded, "No. Do you need help?" I didn't say anything to that and just turned back around and kept speed walking towards my partner's apartment building. He was still following, but now he was talking. I can't remember much of what he said. I was just focused on getting back without being assaulted. Eventually, I heard him stop walking. "I know I'm scary." I don't know why he said that. I took the opportunity to put more distance between us and kept speed walking. He didn't keep following though. He just kept saying, "I know I'm scary." He got louder and louder the further I got. I got to the door of the apartment building and looked back again, and he was no longer in sight. I unlocked the door to the building and then ran up the stairs instead of taking the elevator. When I got into the apartment, I went straight to the window because the unit had a large window facing the street, and I wanted to see if I could see him. Nothing. The streets were empty again. I texted my partner about the experience, but he was already asleep and wouldn't see it. Luckily, I haven't seen that man again, and I hope I never will. Click the join button to become a member today for exclusive content. This happened back when I was around 9 or 10. Me and my friends were watching a movie on a little bed, which was just layers of blankets with pillows in front of the TV in the living room by the front door. I remember we were watching Kung Pao, so we were all giggling and having fun. My parents had gone to sleep a while ago, so we were trying to be quiet. Only the light above us was on in the house at the time. We were talking and joking when suddenly the doorknob started shaking. I knew all my family was asleep and in the house. Me and my friend looked at each other knowing that things are not right, so we quickly lay down and pretended we were asleep. The door opened, and a man walked in. I realized the light still being on would make it easy to tell that we were pretending to sleep. After a half a minute of silence, it was too much for me. I sat up, rubbing my eyes, and said, "Hello?" Looking at him, the man in the doorway had a small bag and stared back at me for a bit. He looked middle-aged with long blonde hair. He looked surprised, like he didn't think that there was anyone up still. My friend continued pretending to sleep, but I was horrified. He said, "Is this 48th Street?" I continued to act sleepy and said, 48th Street is a block that way," and I pointed back behind the house. He just stared at me and stood silently. He said thanks and walked out. The weird bit is my house was on 48th, but instead of street, it was terrace. There wasn't any 48th Street near. I told my parents when they got up, and they were livid that I didn't get them. A few years ago, I moved back to my hometown after divorcing my ex-husband. About a year after I moved back, I got a job at a local boutique. My workspace was in the back where the girls took deliveries and the clothes were stored before being put out in the front to sell. Soon after I started working there, I realized all the girls were creeped out by our local FedEx driver. When the girls saw the truck pull up outside, they'd usually yell, "He's here," and my boss would literally hide in her office so she didn't have to talk to this guy, and it didn't take me long to figure out why. I'm a very friendly person usually, and I like to treat everyone the way I'd want to be treated. This driver, Jeff, would come in to drop the boxes off, and he'd always linger. He would make conversation, and his conversations always got progressively weirder. The first time I met him and introduced myself, he said, "Oh, did you used to work at the funeral home?" It was a little strange to me, but it's a small town, so I just said yes, and that was it. I hadn't given him my last name, so I just figured that he remembered my face. One of the next times he came, he told me that he had just dropped some packages off at my house. When I looked at him and asked how he knew where my house was, he just laughed and said, "It's not a big city. I remember names, and it doesn't take long to realize who's who." It made me feel weird, and when I told my boss about it after he left, she agreed that it was weird, but I just kind of let it go. When my girls told me that the FedEx guy was weird and that he always tried to talk to them when he came in, my warning bells went off. One of the next times he came in, he made a remark about a big box he delivered to my house and gave me a couple of small packages that were addressed to my house and said, "With it being close to Christmas, I didn't want to leave these. I know you don't have a big man to get that box inside. So you want me to come help you and get it in the house when I get off of work?" I immediately replied, "No, I got it, but thanks." And that remark creeped me out bad. That told me that he was either watching my house or paying attention to the names on the mail. Either way, it was enough for me to warn my girls not to answer if he came to the house and start trying to hide when he came in. One day, I even heard him ask one of the girls up front where I was. I started to take my lunch break around the time that he made his delivery, and I did everything I could to avoid him. One evening, I heard a knock at the door at my house and then the sound of packages being left on the porch. I waited a minute or so and then went to get the boxes. Jeff was parked in the church parking lot across my house, watching. As soon as I came out, he grinned and waved and then started to get out of the truck. I quickly backed into my house and shut the door. He didn't come knock, but his truck was in the parking lot for another 15 minutes or so. And my daughter watched him from her bedroom window and told me he kept looking at the house, and I figured that he was waiting to see if I'd come back out. I called the local FedEx facility to report it. I explained the whole story, and the manager told me that they would look into it and thanked me for letting them know. I figured nothing would be done. A couple of days went by and I got a call from a manager at the FedEx facility. He told me that Jeff would no longer be a problem and apologized for everything. I assumed maybe they changed his route or something, but the next driver happened to be a high school friend, and when I jokingly told him, "I'm glad you're our FedEx guy now, the last dude was a creeper," he said, "Yeah, he got fired. Dude was stalking folks apparently." And it made my blood run cold. I watched for him for months afterwards. It's possible he was just overly friendly, but I don't think so. I used to feel bad that he lost his job, but he just crossed too many lines. A little over a month ago, I had gone to pick up an item from a Kijiji seller who, for the sake of anonymity, we'll call Mike, who lives in Canada. We exchanged a few messages regarding pickup, and he was dead set on meeting just outside his house. He wouldn't budge on it and said word for word, quote, "If not specific place here, then I'm done here." He seemed to have quite a stubborn and aggressive temper right off the bat, so I was hesitant to even meet him, but the item I was looking for was something that was sold out online everywhere, so the fact that I found one for sale much cheaper than its original price won me over. It turns out my gut instinct was right from the start, because when I went to do the pickup, it just got worse. He told me he liked to kill and skin animals for fun. He tried to bribe me into his apartment or to walk me back to where I was headed. He was asking where I lived in high detail, and at one point he even tried to put his hands on me, but I took a step back and stood my ground. He was asking a lot of really personal and quite frankly creepy questions, and though I didn't answer them in ways he probably expected me to, I just tried to act polite and not upset him any further, as in his messages he was saying that he was angry and had a horrible day. Once we went our separate ways, he acted all giddy about the fact that Kijiji supposedly links your phone number to your account, and that would be his way of keeping in touch with me. Needless to say, I blocked his account on Kijiji, as he seems to be a really dodgy and sketchy character. He looked miserable and upset when I said that I didn't use social media, which I truthfully don't, but he was desperate to stay in contact with me somehow. Keep in mind, this man looked to be bald and in his later 30s and 40s, slim build, white dude who claimed to have some super attractive wife he met on plentyoffish.com. Yeah, I don't know, creepy. I was tempted to file a report against him to police, but because he technically didn't do anything, I found that it would be pointless to do so, and instead I'm posting a warning about it here on Reddit. Please stay safe out there. Have someone tough with you, or really anyone with you, even if it's a group of people. I legitimately feel like this seller is capable of harming another human being, and it's only a matter of time. She told me not too long ago that she was sitting in her car at night in the parking lot of her friend's apartment complex, and a car that was parked nearby pulled in front of her and stopped the car, turned the lights off, and a guy got out and had something in his hands and was walking towards her door. Luckily, it was an open parking lot and no one was behind her and she was able to pull off. Now, this is my sister I'm talking about, and another time she was getting gas in a nearby gas station like 10 minutes from our house late at night. She was the only one out there at the time, and she had to go into the store, and there was only one cashier. She said a couple of guys came into the store and walked close to her and said to her, "Hey, sweetheart." And mind you, this is late at night, but that's still creepy anytime it's unwanted. She was at the self-checkout and purposefully rang the barcode on a banana since they don't scan, so it would alert the cashier and they came over. She left and went back to her car, but unfortunately, this wasn't where it ends. The two guys came out. One of them went to their car, which was parked right behind my sister's at the pump, opened their trunk, which was completely empty according to my sister, and the other guy circled her car, gestured to the other guy, and tried to open her door. Thank God it was locked, and when he saw that she was on the phone, he backed away and she took off. Then a couple of days ago in our neighborhood, while she was walking her son home from the bus stop, a lady who was walking her dog and had a stroller stopped her and informed her that a guy had been following them and taking pictures. What the hell is wrong with people in this world? I've never had any experience such as this, but I take for granted that I'm 6'6", a grown man who's just not vulnerable and I can defend myself. She's like a foot shorter and not able to defend herself. Just makes me want to get cameras even more now. More than anything, I feel like I wish I could do something. I wish I could catch these sick monsters and let them know that they're in for a rude awakening. Anyways, I just needed to share this because she just laid this information on me and it really disturbed me, and I hope that my sister is able to find peace. My hands are shaking as I'm writing this. I've been staying at my aunt's house for a week or so while they're on a wife retreat with each other. All was well for the first 6 days, then I find that the back gate is wide open. Well, that would not worry me for one, but to access that gate in particular, you have to get past a 6-foot-tall sliding gate. The house is right off the road downtown, so the driveway is on the side of the house and the garage is basically in the backyard. Once you go into the big sliding gate, you can pull right into the front of the garage next to the house. To get to the back door and go inside, there are 2 side gates that fence off the back area. One gate leads to the backyard and the other leads to the back door. I have not touched the one that leads to the backyard the whole time that I've been here. Well, I work the night shift and I arrive home at about 11:30. I get home and I know for a fact the gate was not open when I left because my dog was trying to get out that gate and I told her no and to come to the gate that I was using. I got home and I know the gate was closed. Well, it was about 2 a.m. when the dog started fussing, and I was like, I guess they might have to go potty. So I walked outside and the dogs started barking like crazy. No big deal, they do it every time they go out. Though then I look to my left and see that the second gate was wide open. My heart sank because I knew I didn't leave that gate open, and it was closed when I returned home not even 3 hours ago. I've called my parents and told them the situation and they're not concerned at all. I check the entire house, all the closets, under the bed, and no one's in the house and nothing looks array. Though I am jumping at every sound their cat and 2 dogs make, and I'm scared and want to leave, but also scared to return outside of my car. I have very high anxiety and panic attacks, and I'm feeling one coming. I know all the doors are locked, though none of their windows have curtains, so anyone outside can easily see in. I need some reassurance. Sitting in a back room with all the dogs with me typing this. Long story short, I'm house/dog sitting my aunt's house, and I come home to the back gate that is only accessible after passing a 6-foot gate open. I know it was closed when I left, and I hope to God that someone's not here. Update. I packed all my stuff up and I was just sitting on the couch with the dogs. I noticed police lights outside of the house in front of the next door neighbor's house. I walked outside with all of my stuff, locking the front doors of the house. I went over to the cops and asked them to escort me to my car because I felt unsafe. Turns out, the cops are at the neighbor's house due to reported suspicious activity. 3 men escorted me to my car and I've got the heck out of Dodge. My gut was telling me that something wasn't right, and obviously something wasn't right because cops were at the next door neighbor's house. I'm now safe, and I got off the phone with my brother, and finally, I'm almost home. Hey friends, thanks for listening. Click that notification bell to be alerted of all future narrations. I release new videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you got a story, be sure to submit them to my subreddit, r/LetsReadOfficial, and maybe even hear your story featured on the next video. And if you want to support me even more, grab early access to all future narrations and bonus content over on Patreon, or click that big join button to hear about the extra perks offered for the channel. And check out the Let's Read podcast where you can hear all of these stories in big compilations and save huge on data, located anywhere you listen to podcasts. Links in the description below. Thanks so much, friends. And remember, innies be lint collectors.